Facebook is not being very cooperative with me, so I'm having to jump on with a close-up here. And this is about taking imperfect yet consistent action. So this is me showing up as best as I can to deliver you today's hot topic, which is all about all or nothing thinking, which comes up a lot, which sometimes is also called as perfectionist thinking. So let's kind of really dive into like what it's actually all about. I'll try and follow along with questions. I don't typically do it this way. I don't like the close-up, but I will try my best to follow along. Let me just get that all set up here. So I can see your comments here. And there we go. All right, so obviously I like knowing who's here. I like knowing who's following along. So just pop into the comments and just say, hey Cindy. And today we are going to talk about all or nothing thinking. So I guess let's start off with today a question. Is all or nothing and perfectionist tendencies a positive thing? Is it a helpful thing, or is it a negative thing for you? Does it hold you back more than it pushes you forward? Are there maybe like certain instances in your life where it is more helpful than it's not helpful? What do you think? I'd love for you to pop into the comments and be like, this is where it is helpful, this is where it's not helpful, or no, it's hurtful more than it is helpful for me, or it used to be helpful and now it's not. And again, there might be times where it is helpful and where there isn't, but in general, is it a positive thing for you, or is it not a positive thing for you? So I see some hellos. Hello, Melissa, Catherine, Amanda, Sharon. Good. Now pop back into DMs and let me know. Is it a good thing for you, or is it not a good thing? Where does it serve you well? Where does it not serve you well? So let's look at like, what is it? What is all or nothing thinking, right? Because sometimes we understand it, conceptually, but we don't understand how it actually applies in our everyday life, how we're actually doing, right? So it's associated, obviously, with, like I just said, with like perfectionism. It's a toggle between can't, won't, and then do it all. Like there's no middle ground. So it's like can't, won't, do it all. You're either on one side of the spectrum, you're never in the middle ground. It's like you're fully committed, or you're off the rails, you're on the bandwagon, you're off the bandwagon. It is thinking that that often keeps you from getting started, because you're like, I can't do it perfectly, so why am I going to do it at all? So that's kind of what it is. So why it happens and how it shows up. So here's the thing about your brain. It's wired for certainty. So back in the day, you definitely needed that for survival, right? But now it's a layer of stress. So your brain is always trying to organize things into like little boxes. So it's either trying to say, am I on or off? Is this useful, not useful? Is this friend or foe? Is this safe? Is this unsafe? It shows up in your health and your fitness journey too. So we think about it like fresh start January 1st. And so how many starts have you had, right? I missed a workout, therefore I might as well like start again, right? On Monday and next Monday's, right? I had a dessert, even though I said I wouldn't. It's all ruined, so I might as well keep going. Your brain doesn't like odds. I want to lose weight, but I also like my morning toast. I want to lose weight, but I also like the glass of wine on the weekends. I want to lose weight, but I also like chips. I want to lose weight, but I also like sleeping in. Even on the weekends, Friday and Saturday night, you have your Friday night and your Saturday night brain that's at odds with your Sunday night brain that's trying to like prep for the week ahead, for example, or the clean start on Monday. We don't know how to enjoy life and kind of meet our goals. So it's kind of like, I'm either this or I'm this. I don't know how to do this middle piece here. And that's where all or nothing comes in. Now, again, like I said, it was something that you needed back in the day. You needed it for survival. Is that dangerous? Is that not dangerous? Is that safe? Is that not safe? You needed that. But now it's like mixed into everything else that we're doing in life. And it's not a source of survival anymore. Not necessarily. It's actually a source of stress. So it isn't, and again, it's an evolutionary thing that came as a part of making us feel safe, but it evolved to help us, not to have like that decision fatigue. That's where we're at right now. So simply put, decision fatigue is like that mental exhaustion like someone experiences after making like a lot of decisions. You know, I remember like my mom, you know, if you asked her enough times about something and she would be like, because, and I'd be like, why, because I said so. And then eventually she'd be like, fine, you know, like she's just like, doesn't want to make decisions at the end of the day or after she's been hassled enough. It's like, fine, whatever, right? So, and basically that means like the more decisions you have to make, the harder it becomes to make additional decisions, right? It's like, you know, you have this cup or whatever, and it's like, I got this decision, and eventually it just like overflows and you just can't make any more decisions. Now, for some people, it's like you give in, right? And for other people, that means that you procrastinate on making a decision, which actually is a decision, right? And then that makes you feel like more irritable, maybe more impulsive, more feeling overwhelmed, you know, spending a lot of time making decisions. You're constantly in that decision making mode, but not actually making any traction on it. And then that you can experience other physical symptoms like mental exhaustion, you know, poor sleep because you're up thinking about it all the time. Sometimes that manifests physically where you have like an upset stomach or more indigestion and that sort of thing. So all or nothing protects you from all of that. That's why we tend to gravitate towards meal plans or shake-based programs or pills. It's just like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it, right? It kind of helps with that decision fatigue. It protects our mental energy. The challenge with this, unlike an addiction, let's say with drugs or alcohol, is we can't avoid things like food. We need food to live, right? And it's because of that all or nothing doesn't work. We don't have the skill to how to be with food or learn how to manage to be around food. We either say, I'm not buying it in the house, I'm avoid it at all costs, and therefore I don't think about it and I don't eat it and things are going really well. But as soon as you're around it, you don't know how to be with it. That's the middle ground that we're looking to navigate, because every time you're with it, that's what sets you back in meeting the goals or makes you feel like you're further behind. So why do you want to question this kind of thinking, this all or nothing thinking, right? And maybe you haven't questioned it because it has served you well in a lot of other ways or in a lot of areas of your life, but you haven't really questioned whether or not it's working for you now as a perimenopausal, menopausal woman, or just like even with the changes in your life. But questioning it is important, you know, and it's part of like, is it a habit that you're in, or is it part of, that's just who I am? When it becomes part of who you are, that's just who I am, I'm a perfectionist, all or nothing kind of person, then it becomes harder to change because it's ingrained in your identity, much like, you know, respect is, or loyalty, or kindness, or forgiveness, all those types of values are, it's ingrained in who you are. But if it's a habit, well, then we know that habits can change, right? You know, but when it's ingrained in who you are, there's a couple of things. It says you aren't allowed to be someone else or do something different, right? It's unchangeable. And while you're busy looking, yourself looking for like clean recipes, good workouts, you're missing the key. Sorry, you're busy looking at all of those things and you're missing the really key, which is you're not changing the mindset. Now, it can lead to a lot more anxious thinking. And here's the thing about that when it comes to all or nothing thinking, the uncertainty kind of brings more anxious thoughts. So to reduce the anxious thinking, the feeling, we decide it's all or it's nothing, because when we do that, there is just more certainty, right? In the middle, there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of questions. How do I start? You know, how is this time going to be any different than the last time? You know, what if I can't stick to it? What if I don't see changes? Is this what I should be focusing on? So the messy middle is kind of where all of our anxious thinking lives, or anxious thoughts. We don't like that. We like neat little boxes, and when we mess the messy middle, we kind of miss the place to grow and learn. So what we're learning right now is like, one is how it shows up, right? It shows up in like that I want to lose weight, but I also like my morning toast, and so you know, and that feels really unsafe. Where it kind of came from. Then it's like this thing about decision fatigue, and we make a lot of different decisions in the course of a day that we don't even really aren't kind of even aware of that we're making all the time. And so it just adds another decision. So that's why we like the all or nothing. But it's also like, hey, we don't want to question our thinking because we think it's part of our identity. It's who I am. You're not allowed to be anything different. But also we don't like that anxious middle spot as well. So we try to avoid it as much as possible and put everything in like neat little boxes, right? And then there's potential for failure. Like in that middle, it's not just about the, you know, the anxious thinking or the uncertainty, it's where the potential for failure kind of also resides. It's the kind of thinking that's like, I can't lose if I don't play, right? If I don't fail, I won't be disappointed or discouraged with myself. So when you take a stand against all or nothing, when you take the stand, all or nothing doesn't go away either, does perfectionist. It will still pop back in small ways, and then it'll just grow and grow, which causes it to be even more of a pattern over your life. So then we got this mixture in the middle ground, right, of this anxious thinking, right, and all of these questions. That's probably where you do a lot of researching, or I'm going to do this, I'm not going to do this, right? There's a lot of anxiousness there. And then it's the potential for failure. When you say, okay, I'm going to do it, then it's like all of that fear starts creeping up in there too. And you're like, I don't want to be disappointed. I don't want to fail myself again. That's where it all goes. And then it starts off small, and then it gets bigger, 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 till eventually you kind of like, I'm not doing anything, right? You're kind of at a standstill. And it's worth exploring if and how your all or nothing thinking and perfectionist tendencies are or could be linked to self-sabotage, right? You tell yourself, I have to eat perfectly or it's ruined. I have to get every workout in or I failed, or I have to be fully committed or why bother? Sound familiar? That's perfectionism kind of in disguise. It's a form of self-sabotage. Can you see the connection there? Before I go a little bit further, can you see the connection between how that can be a form of self-sabotage, right? And a lot of women will be like, I'll say, well, what's your obstacles? I'll say like, what are your top 3 health and fitness goals, and what are your obstacles? Me, I'm the obstacle, right? Like the Taylor Swift, I'm the problem, it's me. But you're not looking to identify, well, what about me is the problem? And some of that is that perfectionist all or nothing thinking that is the form of self-sabotage. Because when you set impossible standards, you create a cycle where any small mishap makes you want to quit altogether. You eat one cookie, screw it, may as well eat the whole bag, right? You miss a workout, well, might as well take the whole week off. You don't see results fast enough, well, this isn't working, so why bother? It's not that you can't be consistent, it's that your definition of success is so rigid that anything less than perfect feels like a failure. Because the real sabotage isn't messing up, it's believing that messing up means that you have to stop. And I just want that one to land there for a minute, because if you think about like where you would be in life if you did a hard stop on everything you did, if the day that I went to go buy this house or what have you was the day that I had a hard stop, I don't want to mess this up, I have fear, I have a lot of anxious thinking, I just wouldn't have that. And so you got to really think about which ways is it serving you. It might have served you well before. It might have been your protective mechanism. Is it working for you now? And is it really because you're trying to avoid the anxious middle? Is it because you're trying to avoid that failure piece that might be coming in and that dialogue that comes with it? And is it part of your self-sabotage as well, right? And your brain lies. And here's the thing about uncertainty. Your brain lies. Let me show you how. So when you went off to university or college, were you certain on how things would turn out? I certainly didn't. I didn't at all. I was scared shitless, right? And moving out of the house for the first time, having bills to pay for the first time, and then, moving from high school into college into university, like that was a big deal, right? I didn't have certainty there. What about when you got married? I certainly felt certain, but it was scared to be committed to someone for that amount of time. What about you had kids? Or what about when you signed on that dotted line again for the mortgage? You have loads of examples around you where you dipped into that messy middle part. So if you're listening to this and all you want is sustainable progress, the kind with less anxious thoughts and the kind that allows you to still enjoy life, then we gotta step into that messy middle. And I want to really make that land too, because like your brain does lie. Look at the examples. Like you didn't have certainty. You had the anxious thoughts, the fear, the doubt. You had all of that going away to school, having kids, getting married, buying the house, buying the car or whatever, your first car. Like you had all of that there and you still jumped into it. But how come health and fitness is separate from all that? Even though you have a lot of evidence to say, I can do that. I have a lot of evidence to support, like I can do that, but I've just left health and fitness over here. It doesn't get entered into the equation. So I'm going to share how we're going to do we're going to do this a little bit later, step into that place, right? We need to keep digging, in, so you can clearly see if this is a pattern for you, right? That maybe you're not fully addressing. So even though you have tried every single diet, well, if this is the pattern, this is the reason why you go on the diet, off the diet, or it stops working, you really need to start looking at this pattern, because this pattern is at the root of why the thing you're trying to do is not working, right? So let's explore 7 common traps that show up for women. So this is where, if you have a pen and paper, it'll come in really handy, because you can kind of write these down, and you can have it beside your desk or whatever, and as you're working away, you can kind of like check off and be like, yeah, that's where it's showing up, that's me. So women fall into the trap of focusing on things that don't actually matter, or at least don't matter right now. So it's the constant over analyzing, it's the thinking of the what ifs, the mental checklist of everything that could go wrong. It's like obsessing over one bad grade instead of looking at the bigger picture progress, or trying to master something in the first week and then feeling frustrated when it doesn't come easily. When I teach clients about protein, carbs, and fats, I say, look, this is the first day of practice for a brand new sport. This is not game day, but it's not the Super Bowl, but a lot of women approach it like it is game day, right? So this kind of thinking kind of pulls you out of that present and into the spiral of, not enough, not doing enough, not being enough, not making, fast enough progress. So instead of focusing on what truly moves the needle, you get stuck in the small details, feeling overwhelmed and discouraged before you even give yourself a real chance to succeed. So you're stressing over, like, for example, which superfoods will help you in menopause, but you're still skipping meals and not eating enough protein. The issue isn't one missing ingredient, it's like the overall consistency. Like, you're trying to build a house without having a strong foundation. You're picking out curtains before you even have the windows to put them on, right? You're searching for the best workout for menopause, but you haven't been consistent with any movement. The best plan is the one you actually stick to. So you want the best probiotic for your gut health, but your diet is kind of all over the place. No supplement is going to fix what daily habits you haven't been addressing, right? So that's number one, is like, and that sometimes, comes up actually a lot, is women are focusing on what's not important now, what's maybe, 10 steps down the road, for example, or and they're micromanaging those, and then they get overwhelmed and they feel like, I'm putting in a lot of work and I'm not getting the results back. The second one is the trap of should thinking, right? Keeping you stuck in frustration and self-judgment. I should be further along, right? But you've been, inconsistent, starting and stopping. Progress comes from what you do most of the time, obviously, not what you think you should be doing, right? I shouldn't still crave sugar, but cutting it out completely only makes you want it more. Your body and your brain don't work on shoulds, and I should be able to do this on my own by now, but if you keep forcing unrealistic expectations, you're stuck instead of making sustainable progress. So it's kind of like this should have, like, second guessing yourself, right? Whether that is self-doubt, or whether it's like a lot, but you have a hard time implementing it, and so you're constantly thinking, well, I know I should be doing this because I used to be able to do this and I can't, or I know I should be because I've read and I've done a lot of trainings on this, but I can't do that. It's the should thinking. Number 3 is feeling fed up with yourself, your excuses, and your lack of progress as a way to motivate yourself. Now, I do want to say that sometimes this is motivating for people. You need to hit rock bottom in order to go back up. I get it. But for some of you, you are spending a lot of time running from the bear, from that fear, from where I never want to go back there, I never want to do that, running from the bear versus running towards what you want. And that's a different feeling. If I'm constantly running from the bear, no wonder I get burnt out when things start happening in life. But if I'm running towards something and I actually know what I'm running towards, how much more motivating that is. If you're not motivated, stop running from the bear and start running towards what you actually want. So you're fed up, right? And so what happens in an emotional moment, you kind of make that bold declaration. That's it. I'm done. No more sugar, no more skipping workouts. I'm all in this time. But this isn't a real plan. It's an emotional reaction, right? It feels empowering first, for sure, but it's actually the start of another all or nothing cycle. So instead of addressing why things haven't been working, you go to extremes, setting yourself up for burnout and another, I'm so sick of myself. And I still have it with clients who have that old mentality when I'm coaching them. Luckily, they have a coach to kind of walk them off the ledge. It's like, you do your progress update and it's like, there's not a lot of movement. And it's like, oh, should I do that cleanse? Should I go back to doing this? And it's like that old dialogue keeps cutting out, right? So how does that show up? Like, I'm cutting out all sugar starting tomorrow, but the real issue is that you're feeling out of control around the foods, and it's not about the sugar itself, right? I'm working out every single day. That's what you declare, but you haven't built consistency, so that's not going to last, right? You haven't built it into your life. Every time you get emotionally or mentally stressed out, you don't work out, right? You give it up, and if you look at last year, maybe you gave up working out 4 or 5 times, then that's not the declaration you want to be making, right? I'm done eating after 6 p.m., but restricting your food at the end of the day isn't actually going to fix what else is happening, right? Number 4, let's not forget the hiding that can happen. To avoid, coaches, you avoid groups, you avoid accountability partners, or even those who have achieved the goals you want. Because engaging means taking action, and if you're struggling, it feels easier to kind of pull away. You only want to show up when you're winning, but not kind of when you're in that messy middle. So instead of like seeking the support, you kind of compare yourself to others who seem to have it all figured out, making yourself feel even further behind. So you stop checking in with your coaching group, right? So whether it's these trainings, whether it's a group that you're in, for example, whether it's with your accountability partner, because you don't want to admit that you've fallen off track. That's an example of all or nothing thinking, right? You avoid your accountability partner, because you don't have a good update to share, or you scroll social media comparing yourself to others instead of reaching out for the help when you need it the most, right? So number 5 would be the mindset that convinces you that small steps, when you sit cross-legged and your leg goes numb. Ooh, that's what happens. I shouldn't sit like that. It's bad for your hips. Okay, so the mindset that convinces you that small steps don't matter, so why bother starting at all? And I get that one a lot. So if you commit to one thing, it feels like you have to commit to everything, right? Because you kind of don't believe that small steps are what's going to do it. It's big steps. Walk there faster, take bigger strides, and you're going to get there a lot faster because we secretly don't believe that the small steps are going to add up. And I have women who do this subconsciously. They'll do the small steps. So for example, I'll be like, okay, our goal for this week is to walk 4,000 steps. And they will make it harder by being like on an incline or at a faster pace for those 4,000 so I can get it done. So they add an extra level of hard all the time. And so because they don't believe that small steps are what's going to add up. And the other thing that can happen is because of that, because you can't execute all the steps at one time, then you're always in this state of like waiting for the right time to go all in. So for example, you don't start walking daily because you think it won't make a difference unless you're also lifting weights, meal prepping, and hitting your protein goals. You put off improving your nutrition because you feel like you have to cut out sugar, you have to track everything, you have to spend so much time meal planning, so why bother? It's pointless. You don't sign up for coaching because you believe if you can't do it all right now, then there's no point in doing anything. And then you set up kind of what I call like, this is number 6, safety behaviors, and to give you like a sense of control, but they often keep you stuck. Instead of focusing on the deeper change that actually moves you forward, you rely on external markers or rigid rules to feel safe. So for example, weighing yourself daily could be one of those. For some women, it makes them feel like they're in control, letting the number dictate your mood and your actions instead of focusing on the habits that actually impact your progress, right? So it's like, why bother? The scale's up or the scale hasn't moved, right? So that's like a safety behavior to make you feel like you're in control. You put a lot more weight on with a number on the scale than what you're actually doing on a consistent basis, right? Or the other one could be obsessively counting calories, tracking macros, or following keto or fasting rules, for example, because it feels structured, even if it's not actually working for you. Something can be working for you short term, but not fit your long term. I've had a woman right now who's like, I'm doing keto, but I know it's bad for my health and I know I can't sustain it. And every time I go off of it, I go back to carbs and eating sugar. That's a short-term plan. It's a safety plan to make you feel like you're actually doing something. It gives you a sense of control, but you're actually out of control. Okay, number 7, fear of success and fear of failure, and they can look both the same, right? Both can cause you to self-sabotage just as you're gaining momentum. So you start seeing progress, but instead of pushing forward, you kind of hesitate or slow down. So some women will be like, oh, I'm down so I can treat myself, or I can skip the workout, or I don't have to push so hard because I'm doing really good, right? It's like that complacency or taking the foot off the gas, for example. That it could be a fear of failure or it could be a fear of success. Why? Because success means stepping into the unknown, and that can feel just as uncomfortable as the failure. Because what happens when you make a lot of changes, right, then you're forced to look at how others are going to change along with you, whether they are or aren't, how it's going to change your relationships, how it's going to change the way you navigate life or live life. And that sometimes can be fearful too. So you start feeling good, so you ease up, telling yourself you deserve a break, but really you're afraid of what happens if you keep going. You doubt whether you can maintain progress, so you sabotage before proving to yourself that you can. You don't know how to be the person who has reached the goal, so staying stuck feels safer than stepping into something new. So now that I hope you kind of clearly understand what it is and how it shows up for you. I did give you 7. So I'm curious for those women that are on here on the live or on the replay, because we've covered like the mess, how it shows up. So we covered like decision fatigue. We covered, questioning that kind of thinking. We covered anxious thinking. We covered the potential for failure, and we covered self-sabotage. We covered that your brain lies. You have way more evidence to say that you can step in the messy middle into the anxious and fear place than not. And then we looked at 7 common traps. So out of those 7, I'm curious how many of them in the past or currently are showing up for you. So number 1 is focusing on things that don't actually matter. Number 2 was the should trap. Number 3 was feeling like using the feeling of being like fed up with yourself and your excuses and your lack of progress to kind of motivate yourself. Then we looked at, avoiding your coaches, your group, and your accountability and your partners. Then we looked at number 5 was, convincing yourself that small steps don't matter. Number 6 is putting in the safety behaviors. And number 7 was fear of success or fear of failure there. So out of those 7, drop into the comments and tell me, in the past, what does your number look different than in the present? And in the present, how many of those are coming up? Because it doesn't matter what meal plan. If you do keto, you do fasting, you do shakes, you do cutting out carbs, you do no snacking at nighttime, you do no sugar, whatever that looks like, it doesn't matter what you choose if you are not addressing the all or nothing thinking. It's always going to sabotage your best laid plan, your best laid intention, and your best laid effort, because you were putting all your eggs over here when really you need to do this. Oftentimes when you think, I've tried everything and I do well and then I don't do well, it's because you put all of your energy over here and you've done nothing to address this over here. Whether it's because you've accepted it as part of who you are, or you haven't seen the connection. And I hope that today it did give you some connection. Okay, so the solution we got, you've heard me, if you've been following me for a while, you've heard me talk about the dial method. I definitely like the dial method, particularly if you are a very all or nothing, I do it all or I do nothing. I'm on the bandwagon or off the bandwagon. It's perfect or it's not. It's a complete failure. It's a complete fuck up. Then the dial method is for you. It's a powerful tool for kind of overcoming that all or nothing mindset. So instead of thinking you need to hit perfection all the time or you fail completely, the dial approach allows you to kind of adjust your habits and your efforts kind of in a way that feels more attainable and sustainable. So the method is especially useful for women who are balancing, you're balancing your personal life. Like I got clients who are balancing like careers, the career drivens with like deadlines and high expectations. I have women that I'm coaching that have, are now taking care of their aging parents as well and worried about that. I have, coaching clients that are also dealing with, they have grandkids or their kids are getting off and getting married or just starting school. I have clients who, you know, in their romantic or they just don't have a healthy relationship with their significant other, or they don't have good friends now that their kids have grown up, and, you know, they've never developed their own relationships. So when you look at that, it's like you have all of that, plus you're trying to figure out health and fitness intertwined to all that. That's why the perfect shake or the perfect meal plan only works for a certain amount of time, is because you haven't learned how to make it work through all of that stuff. One of those things go out of balance, and then you have a hard time figuring out that. It's not just from the demands of life, but it's also your mindset. If you feel guilty taking time for yourself, if you do have self-sabotaging behaviors for yourself, if you feel not worthy, not deserving, that everybody else comes first before you, you know, if you take time for you, it's selfish or you're lazy, all that sort of stuff. You still have that dialogue. So the dial helps you not be in that extreme kind of version, right? So how are you looking at the struggle you're facing is something that we want to look at. How you're seeing the effort you're putting in, you know, towards, you know, now we don't want to just see you hit the goals. I want to see you keep the goals long term, right? Are you letting it make you feel weak or feel like you're failing? The key is shifting that narrative. So the dial method, if you think about it, like I always like looking at a stove and it has the dial on it, and I think about, okay, so if it was all or nothing, the dial would be set to 0, the burner would be completely off, the water would never boil. And then if it was set to a 10, that's your perfection, that's your all, and so that water would boil. And if you kept it on there long enough, not only would it boil, it would eventually go dry. Like the water would evaporate eventually in that container, which is why you get exhausted. It's the same kind of visual. And so when you look at the dial, it's like magical things happen at a 5 or a 6, right? You're 50 or 60%, for example, there. That's where you want to learn how to adjust the dial. It does invite that messy middle, which we just talked about, where anxiousness lives, fear, all those questions and all that self-sabotage lives. But you have examples around you. Like I said, you didn't know when you were getting married. You didn't know what was going to happen when you had kids or your first-time parent. You didn't know when you bought your first car. You didn't know when you signed your mortgage for your first house, right? Like you didn't know. So you have a lot of evidence about stepping into that messy middle. So what's it look like in practical terms, right? Now, what I always teach my clients is how to adjust the dial to a 60%. Because if you can adjust the dial to 60%, you're still making some sort of progress. You're still passing the class, right? And the challenge becomes when you dip below that, then you're no longer making progress, right? Now, part of that factor is knowing what to focus on so that you are focusing on the right 60% to be able to do it, right? Okay, so when you know you're making 60%, then when all that life shit happens, you can then go down to 60%. You know how to adjust the dial to 60%. And when that life stuff clears up, it feels tickety-boo, you know how to adjust the dial to a 9 on that. So if you think about the stove, it's like, how do I go between a 6 and a 9 on the stove? So 60%, you're doing well, but you still have room for improvement. Maybe you're missing a couple of meals or grabbing something convenient on a busy day, but overall, you're focusing on nourishing your body most of the time. 90%, you're consistently fueling your body with balanced, healthy meals. And balance is nuanced here because you need to understand what balanced is, and you can still be eating healthy meals and still over consuming, and that can be the reason why you're gaining weight. So you're planning and making intentional choices, but you're also aware that life happens. A meal off track now and then doesn't mean it's all lost. I can tell you too, for example, like I started a journaling habit. My goal is 365 days this year, and journaling is a brand spanking new to me. And I don't have a rule about what time of day I'm going to do it. I just know it's every day. So I'm on day, God, I don't even know. It's like 48 or 49, and I missed one day. So that would be my 90% right now. I'm averaging 90%. I missed one day. I'm not going to say fuck it. I'm going to keep going, right? So the example here between, if you look at it between 60% and 90%, is if you eat 2 out of 3 meals on track each day, over the week, that's 14 out of 21 meals. And over a year, that's 728 meals on track. That's 66.67% of the time you're choosing to fuel your body in a healthy way. And that's a lot of progress. And that's a lot more progress 49. Thanks, Sharon. That's a lot more progress than if you were all or nothing, right? So 2 out of 3 meals, that's 14 out of 21. That's 728 meals. That's 66.67%. Now, if you're doing 2 meals that are, on balance and healthy and they meet your kind of needs or whatever, and 1 that's not, could that 1 outdo all of that? Yeah. But you have to compare that to the all or nothing. Which one gets you further ahead, right? So exercise, let's say you miss 3 out of 7 workouts. So 60% of the dial, you're consistently showing up for 4 workouts per week, but you also allow yourself flexibility when life gets busy. So you're still committed to regular movement, knowing that even 4 workouts a week adds up. And then 90 on the dial would be you're hitting 6 workouts per week, feeling strong and confident. But if you miss one, it's not the end of the world because you learn to adjust and show up and be kind to yourself. So let's break that down. So if you are missing 3 workouts out of 7 each week, you're still getting in 4 workouts per week, which is a 57% consistency rate. That's close to the 60%, and while not perfect, you're still maintaining a significant portion of that routine. So if you were with your nutrition, if you were batting 66.67% and 57% on exercise, would you be further ahead than last year? Yes or no? Yes, it's a yes or no answer. It's a black and white answer, right? Then we can look at sleep, stress, and lifestyle. 60%, you're getting a handle on stress, right? You're practicing stress management techniques, maybe like breathing or journaling. And no, it's not about, this is why you go to stress eating, is because you don't have those stress management techniques, right? And you sleep, it might not be perfect, but you're prioritizing rest as best as you possibly can in this season of your life, right? And 90%, you're really paying attention to how stress affects your body, and you're getting quality sleep most nights. You're regularly doing activities that calm your nervous system, like stretching, yoga, or meditation. So for someone who's been stuck in all or nothing cycle, at 60%, you're still moving forward, but you're being realistic. Maybe it means eating meals that are a bit more balanced, but still allowing for more flexibility. Maybe you skip a workout, but you move your body in other ways like walking or stretching. At 90%, you're pushing your potential, but you understand that consistency doesn't mean perfection. So if you hit 90% on a regular basis, you're setting yourself up for real transformation without the overwhelming feeling of being perfect. That takes skill. That's why coaching works, is because the coach can help you understand how to calibrate the 60 and the 90%. Because I've coached clients where they're on vacation, where they go camping, where they've had stressful deadlines to meet, where they've had a parent get sick, where they've had their husband get sick, terminally sick. I had those things, and it's helping them adjust the dial from 60% to 90 when they can. So that's how I coach clients, is helping them actually calibrate that dial. That's why it works. They know how to the dial method, but it only works if the all or nothing mindset, along with other mindsets, have kind of shifted. Otherwise, you can know everything about the dial method and what habits to practice, and it won't stick, as your mindset will continue to kind of pull you back into the familiar thinking patterns, right? The key to the dial method working is laying out your habits at 60%. What do they actually look like if it was 60% and those at 90%? And here's the key. Ready? Beforehand. Otherwise, what you end up doing is your 60% as an excuse for not meeting your 90%. You'll say, you'll say, what you want to do is clearly define what are the habits you need for 60%, what are the habits you would need to mark 90%. And let me be clear, when I first started my journey, my 60%, my 90% looked totally different than what they are now. And you need to do that beforehand, because what will happen is you shot for a 90% day, and then you'll say, oh, well, it's at least to my 60%. You'll use it as a justification for not meeting your 90% and holding yourself to that standard of the 90%, right? So that's why you want to do the work beforehand. Otherwise, you just get into that excuse model and you keep justifying it as, well, at least it's my 60%, but I did 60%. So, and if you've tried many things or feel lost on what to do, chances are this is kind of where you need to start. So these trainings are kind of designed to help you kind of make connections, take bigger topics, and take imperfect action, because the key is doing simple better. That's your secret to real progress. And this is your permission slip to be an imperfect action taker. Take what you've learned and put it into action today. way. You don't want to just be the kind of person who consumes information, because what happens is you create more of a gap between knowing and doing. That gap becomes wider, right? And you're like, I know what to do, but I can't do it. So you actually want to be the person who does it. And if you want to step out of all or nothing, then you need the permission slip to be the imperfect action taker. So these trainings do provide you with, I hope, valuable steps, but they're just one way I support women. So my one-to-one custom coaching, that's where real transformation happens. That's where we'll simplify nutrition, right? We'll look at exercise, we'll look at stress, we'll look at sleep in a way that supports your hormones, your energy, and your digestion. We're going to tackle the mindset shifts too, because you need what's going on in here to match what it is that you're doing or where you're going. And I'm going to give you the structure. You need the structure, you need the tools, and you need the high accountability to make it stick. So again, it's not about doing it perfectly or doing it all in one shot. It's strategically built out in that way. So if you're looking for one-on-one coaching, then what I ask you to do is pop into my DMs and ask me questions. And, I'll ask you questions, but I would just want to know what your top 3 health and fitness goals are, and then we can kind of go from there. If that feels scary right now, you're going to head to the guide tab at the very top, and you're going to go scroll down through the topics to the transformations and hear the stories of other women that have gone through the coaching program as well. So as always, I want to thank you for being here on today's weekly training. I hope that I took something that maybe feels a bit bigger or obscure and made it, kind of practical or tangible for you, and gave you a practical way to kind of look at it using the dial method. And I always love knowing what is the one thing you're going to do, the one action you're going to take imperfect action on as a result of listening to today's training. Pop into the comments and let me know what that is. All right, I'm Coach Cindy signing off.